Hey guys, how all of you beautiful people are doing? And yes, this is a new series, Accidental Gamer Hero. I accidentally saved the world and was granted 3 wishes when I died. Easy. First wish to reincarnate in the Naruto universe, and second is to reincarnate with the gamer ability. Third wish, I'll save it for later. /OC. So let's start without any delay. As we made our way further into the city towards Yoshio's residence, I was stunned at the environment within. I felt as though I was transported to Edo-era Japan, with its corresponding architecture and clothing. Though the occasional display of technology out of that era broke that immersion and reminded me that I was in a world that had a confusing level of technology. Though the streets were lined with ornate and rustic townhouses, where the first floor functioned as the store while the second story were the storekeeper's residence, there was also television sets displayed in the window. While the passerbys wore elaborate period-appropriate yukatas or kimonos, they also spoke on public payphones. The streets were bustling with activity, with traders hawking their goods and pedestrians out and about patronizing these establishments. Yoshio took on the role as a tour guide, introducing the eastern part of the city as the most touristy because Konoha was located to the east of the capital, which explained all the street food stalls and shops that sold souvenirs. Whereas the northern quarter was the city's business district, while the southern end functioned mainly as commercial areas. He further explained that the capital was separated into 3 rungs: the outer city, the inner city and the imperial court. The capital was laid out away from the daimyo's castle, which was positioned near the western end of the city. The area in the immediate proximity of the castle consisted of the Kizaku residences, as well as some of the wealthiest merchants. The location of each aristocrat residence was carefully attributed depending on their position in the noble hierarchy. The outer city constituted roughly 70% of the city, housing the commoners, craftsmen, retailers, temples and shrines. It was densely populated but still of a relatively high standard of living given they were located in one of the most prosperous city in the world. The commoners mainly lived in semi-collective housings, organized in enclosed communities according to their level of wealth. Yoshio himself owned his own residence, near the border that demarcated between the outer and inner city. Not quite wealthy enough to stay in the inner city but far from being considered one of the peasant, working class. He had his own shop as well, but that was staffed with trusted employees, so he didn't necessarily need to be there all the time. Entry into the inner city was even more heavily regulated than entry into the city. Outsiders had to have an invitation or be accompanied by the higher class to be able to enter. There wasn't anything like a proof of residence that had to be shown to the guards. Since there was only such a small number of people living in the inner city, the guards could identify those who belonged and those who didn't just from a glance. There was a visual difference in the affluence of the people as we made our way further into the city. On the outer limits, people wore simple but practical clothing, but the deeper in we went, the more luxurious their attire. The quality and prices of the products being displayed also steadily rose, as though meticulously designed by the city planner. Shino and Hinata didn't look as awed as I, who was looking around like a country bumpkin oohing and ahhing at the new environment. Asuma saw my naive look and chuckled, but put on a stern face afterwards. Shinji, since this is your first time in the capital, I need to warn you that any and all chakra usage is heavily frowned upon unless absolutely necessary. Which means, you're not allowed to run on rooftops, no walking on walls and absolutely no ninjutsu of any kind. The peacekeeping force have zero tolerance for shinobi trying to throw around their chakra. I understand, Asuma-sensei. He lifted an eyebrow. No, I don't think you do. Don't think that just cause you're a shinobi and are trained to be stealthy that you won't be detected when you use chakra. You will get caught, no ifs, ands or buts. I frowned, more out curiosity than any sort of vexation. Seriously. What, do they hire Hyuga as sentries or something? Hinata turned to me and answered earnestly, I don't think so, but I can ask around if you want me to. Ah no, that was a joke. Please don't take me too seriously, Hinata. Before I responded however, Asuma cut in, nope. It's not Hyuga. It's that guy over there. He pointed towards the castle, you see him. I squinted my eyes, looking into the distance. Who are you talking about? I don't see. Wait, you mean that guy standing on the roof of the castle? Asuma looked impressed. You can actually see him. You have good eyes. You would be surprised how scarily accurate that statement is, sensei. My heightened senses and DEX both vastly improved my visual acuity. As such, I could barely see a vague human-like dot far away in the distance, standing at the tip of the castle's roof. Who is that guy? I asked. The Jounin smirked, Godzai Kurano. He's one of the few S-rank individuals under the daimyo's direct command. My jaw widened. There are Kage-level shinobi in the capital. Not shinobi and not Kage-level, Asuma corrected, at least not all of them are. You didn't think that Konoha was the only military force in this country, did you? Ha ha ha, the world is a place of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. There are full of talented or extraordinary people who prefer to remain hidden and undiscovered. S-rank denotes a level of strength above elite Jounin. There is a fundamental difference between A-rank level fighters and S-ranks, and it is a difference not easily overcome no matter how much effort one puts in. And at the peak of power are Kage-level individuals, referencing their ability to function as a one-man deterrent that protects their village. After generations of accumulation, the Land of Fire has also become capable of training up their own troops that can use chakra. Though their techniques aren't as advanced as ours, the Land of Fire can still produce S-rank fighters just with how many talented people they can recruit and attract with their immense wealth. Kage-level individuals, however, are rare and far between, limited to just a handful in the entire world. That guy, for example, is an S-rank retainer the daimyo raised since he was young to be the strongest and most loyal protector of the imperial dynasty, Godzai Kurano. Asuma sighed in admiration. Why do they call him Godzai, sensei? Shino asked. Yoshio was the one who explained this time with a smug grin. They say that his eyes can see as far as the horizon, and everything within the city is his to survey. No one can escape those eyes of his, just like they can't escape his arrows. Asuma shook his head. That's just a shallow, civilian understanding of the man's true capabilities. He is someone even I cannot accurately fathom, and I have personally sparred with him once before. It is true that his eyes see everything within the capital, though it is not anything like the Hyuga's Byakugan. He just has an abnormally far range of sight and inhuman dynamic vision. Rather than a bloodline ability, it's just something he was born with. What's terrifying, however, is his chakra sensory abilities. A skilled sensor can sense chakra within a radius of several dozen kilometers, however that is just their maximum effective range. Accurately detecting, differentiating and identifying chakra signatures more than few kilometers away is questionable even for the best sensors. However, Kurano can precisely identify every single chakra signature within the capital, a city with more than 500,000 people living within. And not just shinobi, but even regular civilians with next to no chakra to speak of. That's what makes him so scary and a being unique in this world. Even in a close combat fight, Kurano can sense the tiniest fluctuation in his opponent's chakra, and so he can predict what the enemy will do even before they have decided on their next action. His ability is like the combination of the Hyuga clan's Byakugan and the Uchiha's Sharingan put together, but on a deeper level of comprehension no one but he can grasp. Furthermore, his skills with a bow and arrow are also monstrous to the point where his other nickname is Sun Spear. He is the spear of the sun that can hit anyone anywhere within the land of fire as long as they were under the skies of the nation. Criminals all over the world avoid the land of fire's capital city out of sheer fear and respect for Kurano's arrows. He is the true reason crime in the capital is almost non-existent, because before anyone can escape they would be shot down by God's Eye Kurano. If he wasn't forced to remain in the capital city to protect the daimyo, no enemy of the state would rest easy knowing that they could be killed with a single arrow from a dozen kilometers away while they were sleeping. At that moment, I heard a sharp whistle in the air before Asuma's suddenly arm blurred forward. In his hand was an arrow. That bastard is still the same as always, talking with an arrow instead of his mouth. The Jounin chuckled before unraveling a slip of paper that was wrapped around the shaft of the arrow. My mind unconsciously made some mental calculations. Taking into account the distance from the roof of the castle to where we were, add to that the weight imbalance that slip of paper was sure to have added onto the arrow, the archer still managed to accurately hit it with just enough speed and power he knew Asuma would be able to catch it without issue. The names God's Eye and Sun Spear was truly fitting. Asuma glanced through the message he received before smirking to himself and putting a thumbs up into the air. What did the message say, sensei? Hinata asked curiously. The Sarutabi smiled to himself and showed us the slip of paper. On it were 2 words, "Welcome back." Putting aside the strange way of communicating, this Kurano-san is unexpectedly friendly for someone who watches over the city like a hawk. I commented. Asuma raised an eyebrow. He can hear you, you know. I blanched. Seriously? I was joking, but he can read lips though. He laughed teasingly and continued, well, not all of the people under the daimyo's direct command are as friendly as Kurano. Most of them won't be as welcoming since they, for one reason or another, dislike Konoha Shinobi. You guys should watch out, some of them might approach you and start some trouble looking for a reason to prove themselves stronger or something. Hinata and Shino acknowledged Asuma's advice with a high sensei, but I was deep in thought about the daimyo's forces, wondering how strong they were compared to Konoha Shinobi, especially how strong they were when compared to me. But if the daimyo has such capable subordinates under his command, why would he need the 12 guardian Shinobi? I asked, curious. Asuma smiled bitterly. The 12 are more of a symbolic force than a true bodyguard retinue. We are recruited from all over the land of fire, not just Konoha, as a symbol of the daimyo's lordship over these lands. The amount of times I had to fight an actual enemy throughout the years I was one of the 12 can be counted on 2 hands. Most real threats are dealt with by his S-rank retinue before we can even do anything. That's not to say that we are completely useless, he continued, sounding slightly defensive. It's not like the daimyo tasks his S-rank level warriors to do everything. Sometimes their sheer strength is not needed. And besides, there's a reason there are 12 of us. Theoretically, when the 12 of us combine forces, we are able to defeat a single Kij-level enemy combatant. Thankfully though, I've never had the occasion to test out that theory in a real life or death battle. Heh. I muttered in understanding. Preposterous. How dare those cretins? The man threw away the message scroll and slammed his hand on a desk. Declining to attend my party obviously means that they will be attending my brother's one instead. That is tantamount to showing support for his bid for the throne. Your Highness, please calm down. An aide by his side pleaded, careful not to show even the slightest hint of disrespect given the prince's current mood and his well-known temper. The man, despite being dressed in the finest and dignified robes that screamed opulence, was now trembling in his rage. The veins on his forehead and neck bulged as his face reddened. Calm down. You ask me to calm down when our supporters are dwindling by the day. Those wretched nobles. I am the crown prince. I am the heir apparent. They should be the ones begging for my royal attention. Instead they lick the shoes of my brother like the pathetic dogs they are. Treason. The prince continued on his tirade, at times lambasting his pitiful aide for being useless while throwing around and breaking the ornate trinkets decorating the room, each of which cost more than a dozen peasants' entire annual income put together. If this goes on, that bastard will eventually petition father to be named the crown prince, usurping my rightful position. He means to snatch away my birthright. That son of a whore. I'll kill him. I'll kill his entire family. The prince roared, not giving thought to the words he was screaming out and who might be listening to them. Your Highness, please, quench your anger. The second prince is far from having accumulated enough influence to sway a majority of the royal court. We know that at least half of the nobles are traditionalists who advocate for the custom of having the eldest prince inherit the throne. You have their firm support. The rest are opportunists who are sitting on the fence, waiting for the best time to enter into the fray. As long as your Highness remains patient, sooner or later they will realize you are the best person to inherit the throne, my prince. The crown prince breathed out slowly, trying to soothe his wrath. Fine. I will be patient. Where is my mother? The aide flinched, that is. It seems Lady Shijimi is visiting Konoha. The anger that he had just barely pacified once again bubbled up, that useless woman. Those whorish concubines are busy every day politicking trying to chip away my influence. And what has she been doing? Wasting her time at Konoha doing God knows what. Worthless. Perhaps she is soliciting the hokage for your Highness Sake. A man of his power and influence will surely contribute heavily to your campaign. The prince glared at his servant with narrowed eyes. Watch your words, dog. Everyone knows the one rule father has set that we all, no matter Kizaku or Kazaku, must follow, and that is we are forbidden from trying to recruit Konoha and their shinobi for political purposes. My royal father may have stopped caring about ruling the country or our political squabbles, but that is one thing he has made clear repeatedly and blatantly. Someone who overhears us might mistake those words as representative of my defiance of father's decree. Are you trying to get this prince into trouble, you dog? With that, the prince landed a heavy smack on the aide's cheek. It was a slap filled with chakra, one that would have taken off the head of an untrained civilian. But the aide merely fell to the ground, unharmed except for a red mark across his face, and even then to an outside observer it would be apparent that the fall was exaggerated and done purely to appease the raging prince. Forgive this lowly servant, your Highness. I misspoke in a moment of foolishness. The aide got to his knees and kowtowed, begging for mercy. HMPH, get out of my sight at once, dog. The servant got up and bowed deeply. At once, your Highness. This lowly servant obeys. He turned and made to leave the room. And as his back faced the prince, the aide's face changed from one of subservience to a vicious sneer. And you wonder why your supporters are leaving you one by one. Ishira, you are just trash who was lucky enough to be born as the eldest prince. Someone like you is not qualified to become the ruler of this country. Soon, you will be dragged into the mud that is obscurity, and the truly worthy prince will ascend the daimyo's throne. Then, I will step on you like the trash that you are. After settling into Yoshio's house, which was a moderately sized estate 3 stories high designed in a mix of both traditional and more modern aesthetics, Asuma brought us to the Konoha branch office to report our mission success. Although the standard protocol would be to report back at the Hokage Tower, the benefit of having a branch office at the capital meant we wouldn't have to repeat the same thing when we returned. The branch office was staffed with mostly administrative staff, though there were also several high-ranking shinobi who were posted there more for symbolic purposes rather than in any sort of a managerial capacity. It was also there that we were able to receive our mission payment. Asuma had added that since we were in the capital and the costs of living here were undoubtedly more expensive than back in the village, we would need some spending money if we wanted to buy anything. It was a vacation after all. We weren't going to just do some window shopping and leave. Yoshio had accompanied us to the Konoha branch office as well, to put in application for a mission request. He was undoubtedly still worried about his well-being, with the threat of an assassin hanging over his head. Even if his safety was guaranteed in the capital city, which it really wasn't since there were plenty of ways to kill someone even in the capital, especially if the other party did not care about the consequences of offending the entire royal family. He was a merchant who had to travel to different parts of the continent to conduct business. Being forced to stay in the capital for fear of his life would only slowly but surely lead to the downfall of his business. Which was why he also saw requesting for a mission, even if it was going to be an expensive B rank, as an investment for the future for his business. For a merchant like Yoshio, it was all about costs and benefits. If spending a bit of money would ensure the safety of his life, and by extension his money, it was a worthwhile expenditure in his books. The mission could not be processed so quickly, however. The process of applying for a mission could at times be lengthy, depending on how much background research and intelligence gathering needed to be conducted by the mission assignment staff. Of course, as with all bureaucratic red tape, the process could also be hastened depending on how much money the client was willing to spend to expedite the process. But since Yoshio could be somewhat safe while he remained in the city, he himself was not in that much of a hurry to get his mission request approved either. Regarding the situation of Yoshio and his attempted assassination, it wasn't really our problem anymore. As Asuma had put it, we are professionals. And being professionals meant not digging into things more than we needed to. It also meant not doing work we were not being paid for nor assigned to. We already went above and beyond what was required for our previous C rank, and according to the mission parameters, the job was done and dusted. If we were assigned another mission to investigate the source of the assassins, then we would do our best to complete it to the utmost satisfaction of our client. Until then, it wasn't our problem to deal with. Not that we would even be assigned the mission, of course. A B rank was a B rank, not something a fresh out the academy genin team had the qualifications to participate in. They were usually reserved for veteran genin teams with an elite jounin squad leader as backup or an average chuunin squad. Asuma had told us not to get our hopes up since C-rank missions were the most that we could take part in for some time. If the system had generated a quest for me, however, the answer might not be as certain. Well, it would definitely depend on the mission reward and failure penalty. If the risk-to-reward ratio was too high, I don't think I could accept it. After all, right now I was just a small fry in the land of fire's capital city that had hidden masters around every corner. Overestimating myself would only lead to an undesirable outcome. With some money in our pockets, and in my inventory, Asuma brought us around the city to see the sights, so to speak. As expected of the more traditional lifestyle of the capital's residents, there were quite a few Shinto-style shrines and temples located within the city itself, each of which was dedicated to a different deity. The largest temple of them all worshipped the goddess of the sun, Amaterasu, while the rest were much smaller in comparison. I even spotted a tiniest little shrine that worshipped a certain rabbit goddess that I avoided like a plague. Asuma had shared that in the land of fire, Amaterasu is considered to be the principal deity. This was in part due to the goddess' relationship with the ruling royalty. It was said that the land of fire's daimyo's divine mandate, that is their God-given right to rule, was because the daimyo and his family was rumored to be descendants of Amaterasu, making them literal demigods of sorts who were intrinsically superior to mere mortals. I thought it to be nonsense, of course. But all of these stories and myths served only to legitimize the daimyo's right to sit on the throne. The daimyo and his imperial family could be considered to have both symbolic and actual power. Their symbolic power was the result of an engagement in a continual dance of public relations. But underneath it all was the vulnerability and fragility of their political authority. I was reminded of the folk tale from my old life, the emperor's new clothes. The monarch, who once you see that the emperor is naked underneath, you realize that his power is all imaginary. Once those robes were stripped away, what stands before you is just a naked monarch, and you will recognize that the power they possess exists only in the collective belief that they have power. Ultimately, at the most basic building blocks of humanity, they are no different from the vast majority of people. And to keep that simple truth from being recognized by the people required pageantry, mythology, belief and faith. The daimyo's divine mandate to rule is no different from the titular emperor's invisible clothes. So the mythos of the daimyo's divine ancestry was crafted, rooted in traditional folklore and legends, all to tell the tale of the goddess Amaterasu having chosen this particular man and his particular children to lead and rule the land of fire. Perhaps other nations and their respective daimyos had similar stories of their origins and background that served to legitimize their political authority, or perhaps it was unique to the land of fire. This I could not know. What I did know was that old wives' tales like these were insufficient to fool someone like me who was born and bred in a contemporary society where myths and legends no longer justified someone to lead. Aside from the more popular tourist attractions, there wasn't much else in the capital to draw our interest. It wasn't like the city thrived via income from tourists like the land of hot water, so there was little effort put by the state government into developing the nation's tourism industry. The city was largely a commercial powerhouse, serving as a trading hub and nexus of international commerce, which explained its prosperity. But conversely, there weren't much to sightsee because of that fact. Of course, as Shinobi there was only one thing we were interested in: cold hard steel. The weapons district was unexpectedly not as vibrant as I was expecting. I supposed it made sense since the capital was not an armament manufacturing city. Most of the residents here were civilians, not shinobi. I had to assume that most of the arms provided to the city's garrisons were privately manufactured by the state or bulk purchased from another nation. As such, the supply of weapons and its associated products were lackluster as compared to what was available for purchase back home. Looking around and window shopping with my observe showed me that the weapons sold here were mostly made for decoration, patterned steel attached to shiny, gold-plated and gem-encrusted hilts. They were accessories rather than tools crafted to kill. The highest grade weapon I saw was merely at uncommon, and even then the stat bonuses they gave were rather lacking when compared to the price tag attached to these metal trinkets. Asuma sensed our dissatisfaction when we looked around and laughed. Disappointing, isn't it? The weapons made here catered for the Kizaku or Nuva-rish merchants who are looking for swords as ornaments or apparel. It's not likely to find anything surpassing what we can get back home and at a cheaper price to boot. Kind of. I was expecting to find more in the center of commerce if the land of fire, I confessed. Shino and Hinata quietly agreed. The Jounin smirked and leaned in closer. If you guys want to get something good, I've got somewhere I would recommend. Top quality stuff. Our eyes sparkled and we nodded excitedly like a bunch of baby chicks. All right, calm down, I'll bring you there. But, one thing you need to know. The owner, she hates Shinobi. Asuma shared. Eh? She hates Shinobi. Why, sensei? Hinata asked, taken aback. Don't know. I tried going there once but she chased me out the moment she saw my forehead protector. She's a cranky granny, that one. But there's no denying the mastery in her craftsmanship. Her products are as good as those legendary Grandmaster Smiths in the Land of Iron. Asuma explained. I can bring you guys there, but I can't go in with you. And you have to take off your forehead protectors before you go in or she will chase you out with a hammer. He shuddered as if remembering a horrible memory. Hinata fidgeted with her fingers. I don't know about lying to an old lady. I'm satisfied with what I have now. Shino calmly adjusted his shades and added. I looked at them both and shrugged. I guess it's just me then. The Hyuga perked up. I could go with Shinji-kun, if you want. Nah, I'm good. You can go enjoy the rest of the day with Shino. She looked crestfallen for some reason, but I ignored it as I went off with Asuma to the legendary Granny's weapons shop. It was tucked away in a little alley far from the main commercial street, as though the owner wanted to avoid the crowds and look-alloos. But as we approached the store, the dense smell of metal and oil struck me. Function over form was the first thought that hit me when I took in the first sight of the shop. It had zero resemblance to the perfumed and well-ventilated fancy weapons shop on the main street. There were no windows displaying the store's catalogue, nor any posters that marketed their products. There wasn't even a signboard or logo that represented its brand. Even so, I was getting excited. Places like this held the really artisanal products. Swords made with the soul of the smith. That was the feeling I was getting when I neared the store. Asuma bade me farewell some distance away from the store and left after we made plans to meet up back at Yoshio's residence. Before leaving, he reminded me not to cause any trouble or use chakra. It would be a pain to deal with the fallout, he mentioned. When I opened the door of the shop, with my forehead protector removed of course, the heavy smell of metal and oil doubled. It was dingy and barely lit, but the moment I casted, observe, on the displayed weapons, I had to do a double take to confirm what I had just seen. Every single piece was at an uncommon grade or higher. In fact, most of the pieces were rare grade, with only an occasional few being uncommon as well as a few unique grade weapons. What's more was that more than 90% of the armaments here had an item skill attached, even some of the uncommon grade weapons had an item skill. The creme de la creme of them all was an epic grade scimitar being polished by an old woman in the store. There were no kunais or shuriken or any shinobi weapons being displayed. Asuma wasn't lying when he said the owner hated shinobi. There were no greetings that welcomed my visit, only a terse eye lazily glancing at me before the old lady continued oiling and polishing the blade in her hands. Hello. I awkwardly addressed as I made my way further into the shop. Either buy something or get out. She brusquely spat out, not bothering to even look at me when she spoke. Some customer service this is. Curious, I casted an observe at her, wondering what her status would look like. Sachida Mazako LV44. HP 3600/3600. CP 7340/7340. Mazako is a Grandmaster blacksmith. Her skills are legendary, especially for this era where weapons are more or less mass-produced and industrially manufactured. She has the soul of a true craftsman, and any metal that passes through her hands is shaped into a masterpiece that transcends time. Although she is a tremendously skilled blacksmith, she has secluded herself from the world and remains content in obscurity. She hates Shinobi because of something that happened in the past. She is annoyed by your presence. Your char is not high enough to move her. Whoa. Based on just her level, I could tell she wasn't some ordinary, helpless old lady. Her CP is also strangely high for a blacksmith. No wonder the weapons she makes are such high-quality works. There had to be some differences when forging with chakra than without. And what was that about my char? How odd, that was new. I had never seen a prompt like that before. I eyed the scimitar in her hands, gazing admirably at the status window my observe showed. Nameless blade, scimitar, grade, epic. A magnum opus crafted by a legendary blacksmith. It appears to have been created for the sole purpose of cleaving through all of heaven's creations. Though it has only just been forged, the metal possesses an aura reserved only for blades that have reaped countless lives. Given more time, it is a scimitar that will undoubtedly cement its legacy in history as a legendary blade. Durability, 460/460. Damage, SS. STR plus 68. DEX plus 22. VIT plus 35. Item skill, Divine Executioner, passive. CP cost. Every life taken through beheading grants a permanent +1 STR and +1 VIT to the user. How utterly ridiculous. Not only was this the first weapon with an SS damage grade I had ever seen, but the item skill alone was also just downright absurd. Would cutting off the head of 1,000 men grant a 1,000 point boost to STR and VIT? What of 10,000, or 100,000? Would I ascend to divinity with 100,000 STR and VIT in my stats? The scimitar was undoubtedly a pseudo-legendary weapon, something that required more time for the weapon to accumulate history and mythology. Once it acquired enough fame, or judging by the item effect, infamy, it might just evolve to become a legendary grade weapon. As though having sensed my mouth-watering expression and eyes full of desire, the granny's hands stopped the delicate oiling and polishing of the scimitar and she turned to me. "What are you staring at, boy?" I couldn't help but gulp, swallowing down my greed and blatant desire. "That sword. It looks magnificent." Magnificent. What kind of stupidity is exiting my mouth? Has my brain ceased functioning in the presence of a pseudo-legendary grade weapon? HMPH, of course it is. No need for you to say. She snorted, and I didn't have to be a master of human emotions to sense the pride in her tone. A secluded Grandmaster Smith she may be, but deep down in the hearts of any artisan, there lies a desire to have their craft acknowledged. If I may be so bold to ask, is that for sale? I probed. No. She shot me down without hesitation and then turned a wary gaze at me. Why would a boy like you want to buy something like this? This blade was made to chop off heads in the battlefield. It's not meant for some pissant child looking for a toy. You a shinobi. Ha. Near the end of her sentence, the tone turned hostile as her grip on the scimitar tightened. A bead of sweat flowed down my back. Though I knew the special item effects on the weapon I saw with my observe would only be effective when in my hands, I still had no wish to be on the receiving end of such a monstrous weapon. But I was ready for such a line of questioning. No, I'm a trainee from the Kyukujutsu training camp under Lord Daimyo-sama. I smoothly lied, reciting the line Asuma had prepared for me when we were en route to the shop. The Kyukujutsu training camp, or Rising Sun training camp, was the daimyo's answer to the problem of cultivating and nurturing of talented youths in the Land of Fire without having to rely on Konoha for their training methods. Asuma had explained that though the daimyo's forces are able to use chakra, it was far from the level at which we shinobi could. S-rank fighters found in the capital were not produced from an established system of training like what the hidden villages of the world had developed. Rather, those individuals had either unique, natural gifts that enabled them to achieve S-rank without systematic training or received heavy investment and private training in the royal family's exclusive techniques. However, despite all that, these S-rank fighters that were produced in this fashion could never compete with the real monsters of the world. People like Orochimaru and Uchiha Itachi were at the top of the top even amongst Kage-level shinobi, whereas someone like Godzai Kurano had only just achieved the bare minimum standard of being called S-rank. The daimyo received a harsh awakening when he had heard of the Kyuubi's rampage over a decade ago. And when he pondered whether or not any of his chosen champions could fend off a tailed beast like that if the capital was ever under siege by such a monster, the only answer he could arrive at was a resounding no. And so, the daimyo came up with the idea of creating a training camp that could gather and nurture all the most talented youths in the Land of Fire by dumping excessive amounts of money into hiring trainers, buying technique scrolls and procuring the best equipment money could buy. The Kyukujutsu training camp was one of 3 such training camps developed by the daimyo, the other 2 being Tazogari training camp and Hirazuji training camp, and was also the convenient excuse Asuma had prepared for me when I was inevitably questioned by the granny smith why someone of my age was looking to purchase weapons. I heard about those something training camp, sounds like a wet fart to me though. The truly strong cannot be bought with money, they are natural prodigies favored by the gods. One cannot just throw money at you so-called talented kids and expect you to grow stronger just from that. The disrespect and scorn were palpable in her derisive tone. I was tempted to agree with her. It was true that Kage-level monsters like some of those from the Akatsuki were not delicate flowers carefully nurtured in a greenhouse environment. It wasn't resources that made them the terrifying individuals that they were, but pure unadulterated talent in killing and not being killed. No matter how much money the daimyo invested in these training camps, he would have to rely on luck and fate if any of them produced monsters like those found in the S-ranked section of the bingo book. However, it was not a sentiment I could openly share since I was currently masquerading as a trainee from the one of those something training camps she was dismissing. Yet, I didn't want to openly disagree with her neither, so I settled for changing the subject instead. As long as she wasn't suspicious of my identity, it was good enough for me. So about the scimitar. I started but was once again instantly shot down. Didn't I just say it's not for sale? So young and your ears are already faulty, eh? Pick something else. She brusquely interjected. Holding back a frown, I decided to back down. It would only serve to irk her further if I persisted. I had basically zero rep with the woman, and if I annoyed her she might just chase me out with that mouth-watering scimitar. I understand. I walked around the display shelves, browsing her wares. Even if the epic grade treasure was out of my reach for now, there were certainly no shortage of other weapons that were far better than my current equipment. There weren't any shinobi weapons available for sale, so I could only choose from the more martial class weapons displayed. There were many katanas, yai spears, and even a few heavy weapons like hefty halberds and tetsubo. They were all weapons designed for the battlefield, and not the stealthy approach us shinobi preferred. That didn't concern me much, however, as thanks to my myriad armament fiend skill, I was proficient in practically every type of weapon being sold here. Shinzo Hakkensha, Jumanji Yai, grade, unique. Damage, A. DEX plus 43. STR plus 12. Char plus 10. Item skill 1, Heart Seeker, passive. CP cost. Deals 500% damage when stabbing an enemy's heart. Item skill 2, Fire Cloud, passive. CP cost. Channels Fire Nature Chakra with 200% efficiency. Mokusai Musha, Battle Axe, grade, unique. Damage, A. STR plus 70. Item skill, Forest Warrior, active. CP cost, 200 per minute. Raises all stats by 20% when in a forested area. Boshokyukan, Katana, grade, rare, growing. Damage, C. STR plus 5. DEX plus 5. Vit plus 5. Int plus 5. Char plus 5. Item skill, Gluttony, passive. CP cost. Devours swords to strengthen or repair itself. These were just a few of the unique grade weapons available for sale in this tiny, deceptively ramshackle store hiding masterpieces upon masterpieces. You have a pretty good eye. Upon seeing me linger at a few of her more impressive crafts, Meizako the ladysmith couldn't help but comment. It's hard to hide such brilliance, Ona-san. I remarked as my finger traced the spine of a particularly vicious-looking katana with jagged edges like teeth on a shark. It was named Boshokyukan Gluttony Sword. What came across as weird was that despite it being a rare grade weapon, it only had a damage grade of C. And it had a growing grade attached to it as well, the first I've ever seen. Today was a day of many firsts for me, it seemed. Flattery is not an acceptable currency here, boy. She shot back, though the initial edge in her tone was now considerably eased off. This lady, she was surprisingly weak to praise when it came to her creations. Truth is not flattery, Ona-san. TSK, if you like it so much, then just buy it and get lost. I turned back to the granny, who had stopped polishing the scimitar altogether and was just watching me from behind the counter. How much for this sword? I asked, gesturing to the gluttony katana. Though its damage grade was subpar, the growing label intrigued me. She held up 3 fingers. 30,000 ryo. 3 million. Expensive. It was ridiculously priced. No, for a unique grade weapon which were so rare, the only other one I have seen before today was Asuma's trench knives, that price was more than reasonable. But for me with just over 300,000 ryo to my name, it was way out of my price range. She must have seen through the calm expression I so carefully managed. Smirking, she asked, too expensive for you? Pick something out of the bargain bin at one of those trashy shops on the main street then. That is, 3 million is a bit. HMPH. If you can't afford it then don't buy it. How overbearing, although, she certainly had the right to be with her skill set. Although, there was something amusing about my current situation. Having to haggle over the price for something was an experience that was incongruous to my previous life. As a billionaire, there were very few things on earth that could not be bought with money. Never in a million years could I have foreseen myself racking my brain over insufficient funds in a different world. However, the benefits of having unique grade weapons could only fully be enjoyed by me, who had the gamer system that added item effects and stat bonuses to these masterpieces. For anyone else, they were just well-crafted weapons, nothing more and nothing less. To demand 3 million Rio just for well-crafted weapons. I could see why there were no customers, even though her products were of the highest quality. There was no way I could give up after seeing such exquisite products. The gluttony blade had piqued my interest, and if I surrendered now I would certainly regret it when I left the capital. Is there any way the price could be reduced? Just by a little bit? I bargained. Those tricks I utilized back at Konoha when I got Kotetsu no Ryu would not work here against someone who knew the true worth of her creations. Would I have to resort to begging, I wondered, when her stony demeanor did not budge an inch? Perhaps there is something I could do for you, maybe an errand, or a job? I asked, hoping to prompt a quest. Her eyebrow raised, before she scoffed. Why would I need you to do anything for me when I could just do it myself? And for the things that I can't do, you think you could? Right, of course it wouldn't be that simple. I have been reborn with the gamer system, but that didn't mean I was actually in an RPG where everyone but me was an NPC that could give quests. Yet, if no quests were generated, how could I build my rep with this Lady Smith? And if I couldn't build rep with her, how might I get a discount, or better yet get my hands on that scimitar she was hoarding? Should I get a loan? Surely Asuma has that much money, since I'm sure being one of the 12 Guardian Shinobi paid handsomely. But would he have that sum on his person while he was out on a mission though? There were probably banks in the capital, right? Could I get a loan at one of those places? But being in debt sounds dreadful to me. As I continued negotiating with Meizako while thinking of different ways I could possibly get that much money, the store door opened and another customer entered. Oh, Meizako Granny actually has another customer other than me. What divine revelation is this? The new customer could only be described as a classic Eichsman, with sharp brows, an angular jawline and sharp nose. His hair was tied up in a bun and neatly held together with an undecorated hairpiece. Even though he was wearing a plain blue yukata paired with a darker blue haori with no ornate designs, the young man had a distinctive atmosphere or quality to him that did not seem ordinary. He looked to be about 2 or 3 years older than me, just a teenager, but he carried himself with a poise that was unmatched by others his age. It was an aura I recognized from the nobility I had interacted with back when I was still a billionaire in my previous life. Probably some Kizaku youth, either-ized. His disrespectful tone was brushed aside, however, as the Lady Smith just waved off his teasing, "Bah, he's no customer. Just some kid trying to haggle with me." Embarrassed, I scratched my cheek. I cannot deny that. It's just that I have fallen in love with this blade and cannot bear to part without it. The young man grinned and approached me, his eyes subtly scanning my personage, perhaps trying to identify my background. "Ah, I see that you're a man of culture as well. You too have fallen into obsession over Meizako Granny's crafts like I have," he complimented, rubbing his chin with his eyes closed while nodding. Flowery words. The old woman dismissed, though she looked away as though trying to hide the pleased smile I just narrowly spied. Indeed. I must confess, I have never before witnessed such exquisite craftsmanship. I could only imagine the hours and dedication Owner-san, no, Owner-dono has put into each and every piece here. Unfortunately, I lack the funds to bring home one of these masterpieces with me. Sigh, might this be what unrequited love feels like? I espoused with a bittersweet smile, sensing that flattery was the Lady Smith's one weakness. My words only brought a beaming smile on the young man's face, a fellow connoisseur of fine metal. Maizako Granny, could you not find it in your heart to provide a discount for one of your admirers? After all, what use is good steel when left collecting dust in this tiny store? Meizako's eyebrow twitched. You cheeky brat, my shop may be small, but it's certainly not dusty. The young man waved his hands placatingly, it was just an expression. How could such fine works of art actually be dusty? My point remains, however. HMPH, if he can't afford it, then that just means he is not fated to own one of my creations. I would rather they be ownerless than have someone unfated wield them. Oh, don't say that, Maizako Granny. The young man pressed, affectionately draping his arm over her smaller frame. All your masterpieces deserves a suitable owner, no. I watched their exchange silently, though inwardly I was struck by the young man's charisma. He was either the granny's kin or someone who has patronaged this shop for a long time, since the grouchy old lady only looked the slightest bit annoyed at the young man's excessive skinship. Either way, he had such a way with words that even I was impressed. This person wasn't simple. Damn brat, you sure are persistent. Why are you working so hard for someone you've just met? The Lady Smith replied. As though caught off guard, the young man blinked, before he answered, don't know. I just felt he was someone interesting and worth getting to know better. Ah, how rude of me, I have yet to introduce myself. My name is Shinji Ikrai, pleased to make your acquaintance. The young man glanced at the offered hand for a moment with an unreadable expression, before he grinned brightly and shook my hand. Likewise, Shinji. You can call me Shin. Heh, we have pretty similar names, eh? So where you from? You don't look like someone from the city. Was it my attire that looked out of place? I wondered as I answered, oh, I do live in the city. I am from the Kyukujutsu training camp. Heh, that's so. His eyes narrowed but his smile did not waver. Did he see through my lie? How impressive, he continued. I heard those from the training camps are really talented. It must be my good fortune to meet someone like you here today. Ah, it's no big deal really. Eager to change the subject, I asked him, do you come here a lot, Shin-san? Ever since I was a little kid. He answered, I fell in love with Maizako Granny's swords and Maizako Granny herself, of course, when I was 6. And I have come here regularly ever since to admire her and her works. The lady in question shook her fist at him, annoyed but hiding a smile. Ah, seriously, you really have a talent at riling me up. Do you have a death wish? The young man grinned and poked her puffed up cheeks teasingly. Ah ha ha, I love seeing Maizako Granny riled up. Too cute. The atmosphere between them was similar to a grandma and her cheeky grandson. So how much money do you have, Shinji? Shin asked casually. 300,000. I abashedly answered. That was the total sum of my life savings after calculating in the mission reward I just received from the C-rank mission. How embarrassing. Ha! You wanted to buy my sword with just 300,000. Wishful thinking. What impudence! Lady Maizako immediately exclaimed angrily. She might have been offended by what she perceived to be insincerity on my part. The young man Shin remained silent, though I could sense a bit of calculation going on behind those earnest eyes of his. It was odd, but this guy was strangely hard to read. My best guess was that he was trying to figure myself out like I was with him. I bowed in apology to Meizako. "Forgive me, it was not my intention to offend." She didn't seem pleased however, and merely folded her arms irately, not acknowledging my apology. Shin leaned in and asked probingly, 300,000 is a lot of money for someone your age. Are you the scion of a Kizaku family? This guy is troublesome. I didn't know if 300,000 was a lot of money for a Kizaku noble, or if it was an abnormal amount of income for a commoner living in the capital. I had only been here for roughly a day after all. It wasn't like I could grasp the economic situation of the city in just the short time I have been here. My cover story wasn't designed to be impenetrable. It was supposed to be enough for just a quick, one-off, get-in get-out type transaction. I hadn't expected to be questioned about it. Ha, how could I be a Kizaku? I'm just a trainee who kept saving my allowance and somehow it ended up like this. I tried to laugh it off, but I couldn't tell if my words convinced them. No, Meizako wasn't at all suspicious. It didn't seem like she was the type of person who constantly second-guessed what others told her. But the young man on the other hand. I still couldn't tell what he was thinking at all. Thankfully however, he didn't press me and just chuckled, "Ho, you're a pretty frugal person, huh? That's an admirable trait to have." Well, 300,000 really isn't enough to buy one of Meizako Granny's weapons, even if she gave you a discount. You're goddamn right. The Lady Smith huffed out. I sighed. Pity. The young man took a ponderous gaze and then his eyes lit up as his lips curled into a smile. How about this? In commemoration of our fateful meeting and friendship, why don't I loan you the rest of the sum needed to buy that sword you so dearly desire? Interest-free. I took a step back in shock. Did I luck out and coincidentally meet the heir of some wealthy dukedom or something? How generous and trusting. Meizako widened her eyes. Boy, you don't even know who this brat is. How are you certain he will pay you back? Shin's eyes took on a strange glint as he glanced at me. How could someone from the prestigious Kyukujutsu training camp renege on a debt? I trust him. His tone was almost imperceptibly filled with a knowing and teasing expression. Who was this guy? And why did I feel like he knows more than he is letting on? Unable to withhold my curiosity, I used, observe, on the young man. Ishikawa Shinosuke LV32. HP, 6160/6160. CP, 6300/6300. Shinosuke is the third son of the daimyo of the Land of Fire. He is naturally gifted both as a warrior and as a scholar. He has keen eyes, sharp intellect, and a robust vitality. Though blessed in his birth, he is also cursed, for he is the fruit born from the union between the daimyo and a common maid. He resembles the daimyo more closely than his other half-brothers. He is intrigued by you. I almost choked on my saliva. This whole time, I was talking to a prince. Now I understood how he could unconsciously exude such a pressure and aura of majesty even though he was behaving so friendly and personable. This was the first time I met the man who would be the center of the storm in the Land of Fire. So what do you say? Deal or no deal? Shin, or rather, Shinosuke, a veritable prince of the Land of Fire, prompted. After using, observe, on the young man and discovering his true identity, I had been shocked silent for a few moments, ruminating on the new information. In the short time between realizing his identity and his prompting, I was putting together a few key facts to form a conclusion. Firstly, the prince was obviously trying to hide his identity. He was wearing plain clothes that did not suit the prestige of a member of the royal family. He gave me a pseudo-false name and did not introduce himself as a prince. And he didn't bring any servants with him despite his sensitive status, or at least none that he brought into the store. Second, he saw through my lie the moment I introduced myself as a member from the Kyukujutsu training camp. How could he, as a prince, not be able to recognize people from the training camps established by his father? However, he also did not call me out on my ruse, which leads me to the next point. Third, he had to have some ulterior motives for offering to pay for the sword other than purely celebrating a new friendship as he had claimed. But what those motives were, I could not figure out. In his eyes, I should have been a nobody. Someone not qualified to even speak so casually in his presence. I was no different from any of the other schmucks wandering the streets unless he knew about my shinobi identity. Even then, it wasn't like the identity of a genin from Konoha was that important. So what was so special about me in his eyes then? If I hadn't known about his identity as a prince, I might have been satisfied with the conclusion that this young man was just a generous spendthrift with too much money in his pockets and a genuine appreciation for my supposed love for Lady Maisako's weapons. But it was different now that I had discovered his identity. No member of royalty, or any person in power really, that I knew in my past life did a favor just out of the kindness of their hearts. There was always a hidden agenda and layers upon layers of plans and veiled intentions. If there was one thing I learned from my childhood lessons about power and influence, it would be that it was not smart to owe someone of that nature. Especially if I did not know what he would possibly want from me. Thus, the question now was, what did he want from me? What could I, who could only be perceived as a common genin from Konoha, offer him? Might it be my body? Was this prince someone who had that kind of a hobby? It was a wild conjecture, but not one without merit. Those same members of royalty and people of power that I knew of, some of them at least, had kinks that leaned towards sexual deviancy. And it wasn't homosexuality that I was talking about, rather it was the pedophilic nature of his possible interest in me. I was currently inhabiting the body of a 13-year-old boy after all, while he looked to be at least 15 or 16 years of age. A 2 or 3 year age gap might not seem significant, but if he was attracted to the body of a 13-year-old boy, that would be problematic. I withheld a shiver down my spine and glanced at him with barely restrained wariness. If he really were interested in me in that way, it would be difficult since the guy was a freaking prince who was probably used to getting his way. Swallowing down my anxiety, I faked a smile and politely declined his offer. How could I accept such generosity? 3 million is not a small sum, my friend. Shinosuke laughed it off. It is uncouth to discuss money amongst friends. You are too kind, Shin-san. But, really, I cannot accept this goodwill. I repeated my refusal, hoping he would not take offense. Come now, Shinji, I insist. He shot back immediately, his tone not leaving room for negotiation. How persistent. I took on a flustered appearance, before adopting a begrudging expression. Truth be told, I don't like the feeling of owing another person. It is nothing personal, just something that is against my principle. Shinosuke fell silent, and though his expression did not show it, I had a feeling he was upset being rejected 3 times in a row. Just as I was beginning to worry about his reaction, he regained his bright smile. If that is the case, then I can't force you to accept it. It is good to stick to your principles, Shinji. Just be careful, those principles will not one day lead you into trouble. That was a veiled warning if I have ever heard one, which kind of pissed me off honestly. Suppressing my irritation, I gave a forced smile. I thank you for your advice. I guess this blade and I are not fated to be together. Unfortunate, but it is what it is. It is getting late, I have to make it back to the training camp before curfew. I will be back, Onna-san. It was nice to meet you, Shin-san. And I hope we will never see each other again. Come back with money. The Lady Smith grunted out before returning her attention to the scimitar. Leaving so soon? How about I walk you back to the camp? We can talk more about our mutual appreciation for Masako Granny's blades. Shin offered, who without waiting for a response opened the door and held it for me. This guy, what was his deal? Why was he so interested in me? Even my observe did not reveal anything beyond saying that he was intrigued by me. What was so damn intriguing about me? But now that he was already half a foot out the door, I could hardly tell him to bugger off now, could I? Plus, he already knew I did not belong to any supposed training camp, so what was his actual intentions? Sure. Let's walk and talk. I forced out a smile at his offer. What else could I have done? I wasn't allowed to use chakra in the city, so running away wasn't an option. And I didn't want to offend a prince more than I already had by rejecting his offer thrice in a row. Who knows if a fourth rejection would subject me to imprisonment by the Imperial Guards or something. As I exited the store, I was half ready to encounter an entire platoon of Imperial Guards just waiting to do his bidding. I was surprised to see only one such servant, a woman in a more modern attire rather than the traditional Japanese yukatas and kimonos I saw so frequently in the capital, dutifully waiting for the prince. The woman looked to be in her early 20s, with black hair held together by a red ribbon in a ponytail. Additional hair clips that held stray hairs in place gave her a prim and proper look that was only further reinforced by the no-nonsense look on her plain face. Attached to her waist was a sheathed katana, one that I could only assume to have been purchased from weapon shop behind me. I instinctively used observe on the servant as a precautionary measure. Setsuna LV77. HP 14580/14580. CP 10300/10300. Setsuna is a loyal attendant to Shinosuke, the third prince of the Land of Fire. She was raised with only a singular purpose in her life: to serve Shinosuke as his sword and shield. Despite her martial prowess, she serves not only as a bodyguard to the prince, but also as a secretary and confidant. Her loyalty to Shinosuke is absolute, and so is her determination to protect him from any and all harm. Setsuna is cautious towards you. A Jounin-level attendant. This only further proved that this Shinosuke person was not simple. And I did not doubt that he had only brought one servant along because he wanted to remain inconspicuous. Setsuna bowed deeply upon seeing her master, her poise a perfect representation of etiquette and servitude. "Your high young master, this is?" she asked, correcting herself after the initial slip-up. "Hey, isn't that too obvious of a mistake?" "Ah, this is my new friend Shinji," Shinosuke introduced, though I did not miss the light glare he sent towards the woman for her mistake, who I had noticed he conspicuously did not introduce. "He is from the Kyukujutsu training camp, except, you're not really from the training camp, are you, Shinji?" he asked inquisitorially. So he was getting straight to the elephant in the room. I gave a wry smile, content with playing along with this charade. I knew you saw through me. How did you figure it out? Well, for starters, I have been to the Kyukuijutsu training camp before, and I have never seen you there before. Secondly, you must not have done your research before lying to poor Meizako Granny, because Kyukujutsu training camp members all wear an armband that identifies them as such. Third, the training camp members are all provided equipment by the state. They would have no reason to buy weapons from outside vendors since external equipment aren't allowed to be used in the camps. He explained, the smile from on his face growing more confident. Asuma, you dumbass, how was the cover story you came up with so easily debunked? I could excuse the first and third reason, but could he have not remembered the armband? Well, I couldn't fault the Sarutobi that much. How could he have expected I would encounter a damn prince on this short visit to a weapon shop? Well, you got me. But how do you know so much about the Kyukuijutsu training camp? I asked, turning the question back onto him. But my question did not deter him. It seemed as though he was even expecting it. Like I said, I have been to the Kyukujutsu training camp before. And not to brag, but I have a pretty good memory. So what now? I prompted, wanting to see where he was going with this line of questioning. The prince took on a ponderous look, as though trying to decide what he wanted to do with that information. I hated that this person now had something over me, even if it wasn't that big of a deal. Or at least I hope it wasn't, unless fraudulently claiming to be a member of the 3 training camps was against the law or something. But if worst came to worst, Asuma should be able to cover for me using his identity as an ex-member of the 12. It was his idea in the first place after all. Now, his eyes took on a malicious glint which honestly took me aback, but it brightened considerably as he continued jokingly, nothing of course. What did you think I was going to do? Threaten you into something? Ha ha ha, I'm not a suspicious person, Shinji, you can relax. Yeah right, you're not suspicious. What worries me is that I still don't know what you want from me. What I can't figure out is why you claimed to be from Kyukujutsu training camp in the first place. It's not like their members are able to receive discounts from the stores, unless... He scanned me up and down once more, his eyes pausing at my attire and the weapons pouch strapped to my thigh. Unless you knew that Meizako Granny hated shinobi, and so you lied, knowing you needed a suitable reason for needing a weapon even though you're so young. Because you are a shinobi. Shinosuke snapped his fingers with an aha look, looking pleased with himself for figuring out the truth. This guy was good. As perceptive and intelligent as what his status wrote about him. He reminded me of Shikamaru if the Nara wasn't lazy and more sociable. It seems like nothing can get past your eyes, Shin-san. I begrudged, shaking my head in surrender. It didn't really matter one way or another even if he knew I was a shinobi from Konoha. It's not like it was against the law to be a shinobi. Shinosuke smiled humbly, it was just a lucky guess. And you're most likely from Konoha, right? Oh. Why would you say that? Your boots, they don't look very worn out, which probably means you did not have to travel long to get here. Your clothes as well, they don't look like the baggy attire Suna shinobi would wear, nor the more waterproof ones those from Kiri, Ame or Taki would wear. Iwa and Kumo, as you should know, are not allowed free entry into the city, unless they are messengers or ambassadors, and even then they would have escorts following them around. You could be from Kusa, but the daimyo of the country they are in is now having a little spat with our daimyo, so it's unlikely their shinobi would be sent here. Plus, shinobi from other hidden villages besides Konoha would never take off their forehead protectors while in the capital. because it's super suspicious if they do, and they would get dragged into questioning by the guards. Which means that most likely you came from Konoha. Shinosuke deduced, before throwing me an expectant look, waiting for my confirmation of this theory. This time I widened my eyes in surprise, not expecting such a detailed analysis of my identity in the short time I had encountered the prince. Very impressive. Once again, Shin-san's deduction is accurate. The young man beamed at my acknowledgement of his abilities. However, I had a sense that behind that smile was not a need to be praised. No, that was too simple a motivation for one so sharp. He was not seeking validation for validation's sake. He wanted me impressed. He wanted me awed. And I was. But for what nefarious purposes? If that is all, I do need to get back to my squad. My objective right now was to get as far as possible from this shady salesman-like person. Something about his disarming smile had me wary. And I've learned to trust my gut instinct when it came to snakes. Shinosuke's smile wavered for a moment before coming back full force. I see that you are busy. I won't keep you then. See you around, Shinji. Remember, principles are good when it is convenient. But there are times you need to surrender. I faked a grateful smile and bid the two farewell. A strange need to get into an ice-cold shower after that interaction overwhelmed my mind. Interesting. Shinosuke muttered to himself as he watched the fascinating young shinobi walk off hurriedly. The moment Shinji was some distance away, his entire demeanor had changed. His previously brightly smiling and beaming expression was replaced a cold look of calculation, as though anything and everything that entered his eyes was consciously quantified into useful information. Your Highness? Setsuna asked, using the prince's proper address now that they were the only two left outside the store. That boy. Interesting, is he not? His attendant thought back to the first impression she had of the boy. The way he carried himself was not at all like a civilian. There were traces of an ever-present vigilance for external threats. His physique, while still childlike, had compact muscles that belonged only to trained fighters. The attire the boy wore was not one of fashion, but practicality. That, combined with the weapons pouch strapped to his thigh, had told her he was a trained shinobi from a single glance. And as her prince had pointed out, he was likely a shinobi from Konoha. Setsuna was trained to safeguard her liege's well-being from the moment she could walk. As such, she was also taught how to discover potential threats with just a glance. There were countless signs that might signal to her whether an unarmed civilian walking past her prince was truly harmless or a deadly assassin in hiding. Calloused fingers, measured steps, muscularity, and other indicators of threat levels were displayed plainly before her discerning eyes. Even against sneaky shinobi, Setsuna had learned how to identify those silent killers hidden behind their disguise jutsu. Very little could hide from her eyes, which was also why she could not fathom what about the fledgling shinobi intrigued her prince so. He doesn't seem very special to me. Setsuna replied, her tone leaning more towards casual rather than the etiquette expected of an attendant of a member of the royal family. Her prince was never a stickler for formality, though it was only limited to when he was not in the presence of other distinguished figures. Setsuna was used to speaking informally with her prince when they were alone, thus there was no need for the overt decorum she had displayed just moments ago. Shinosuke glanced in amusement at his bodyguard. So there are some things that escape even your eyes, Setsuna. Her lips crinkled at the thought. My apologies. What did your highness see in the boy that eluded me? Setsuna, your eyes, while sharp, are only able to perceive what lies on the surface. It is unfortunate you do not have the gift of chakra sensory, for you would have picked up on the unique traces of his chakra. The prince spoke enigmatically. She tilted her head. Unique. Yes. Kurano has helped me hone my chakra sensory abilities ever since I have awoken them. Though I cannot claim to have a similar mastery in terms of range, I do have one unique advantage even compared to the god's eye. I have a near photographic memory, which applies to my chakra sensing as well. Setsuna nodded, having known about her prince's lessons with one of 3 kid-level fighters in the daimyo's retinue. While her prince has yet to master chakra sensing to the extent of God's Eye Kurano, he is able to identify the chakra signatures of people just based on memory. At first, I only thought he felt strangely familiar, even though I could not remember having ever met such a person, which is especially odd for me who has near-perfect memory. Then I realized, it was not the boy who seemed familiar. It was his chakra. Shinosuke turned to his attendant, a mysterious smile creeping up on his lips. Imagine my surprise when I remembered what his chakra reminded me of. It stumped me for a while because the last time I felt that chakra was before I discovered my chakra sensing abilities. Then I remembered, it was the distinctive, baleful chakra belonging to a clan once known as one of the strongest shinobi clans in history. The chakra of an Uchiha. The prince looked like he was trying to hold back his glee as he declared with gusto. Setsuna's eyes widened in surprise before nodding in understanding. So that is the last Uchiha. No wonder you were so interested, Your Highness. He mirthfully shook his head. You're wrong. I know who the last Uchiha is supposed to be. Uchiha Sajuke, a boy I have once met before years ago when his clan visited the capital. And unless my senses have dulled, that was not him. His attendant looked confused. She knew her prince was not one who would make a mistake such as this. If he said that boy was an Uchiha but not this Sajuke person, then she knew it to be true. But if that wasn't the last Uchiha, then who is he? I know, right? Isn't it interesting? There is another living Uchiha other than the survivor of the massacre and the clan slayer. Fascinating. The prince adopted a calculating smile. He continued, Konoha has been hiding another Uchiha from the world. Or perhaps, they do not even know that he is an Uchiha. Or maybe even he himself does not know it. How mysterious, how utterly interesting. Shinosuke's mind rapidly calculated how best to utilize this information. So many possibilities, and yet there were equally many factors to consider before he could act on any plan. The daimyo had decreed that none was to contact Konoha or her shinobi for political agendas, but how could he leave such a tantalizing morsel untouched now that he has discovered one? A third Uchiha unbeknownst to the world was a chess piece that was not at all insignificant for his ambitions. Though this Shinji boy was still far too young and immature to be made use of now, there was still time. Shinosuke would give him a few years to ripen and mature. Of course, that did not mean he would deal with the hidden Uchiha with a completely hands-off approach. Though Shinosuke was forbidden from openly or even covertly recruiting him to his faction, there were still things he could do to nudge the boy in the right direction. Offering to loan him the money to purchase the sword was one such act. 3 million ryo, while a vast sum for the common populace, was pocket change for Shinosuke. If such a paltry amount could buy the loyalty of one of a young, impressionable and promising shinobi, not to mention one of the last few remaining Uchiha alive, it was more than worth the money. Alas, the boy had refused his gift disguised as a loan. Even if Shinosuke had not intended to collect on the debt nor call in any favors because of it, Shinji had rejected it based on what he called his principles. A surprise to be sure, one Shinosuke had not been expecting. The Uchiha looked to be about 13 years old, meaning he likely just graduated the Shinobi Academy unless he had graduated early. At that age, boys were not the sort to look a gift horse in the mouth. Not many would turn down the offer of a cool new sword due to preconceived notions of principles or whatnot. So unless Shinji knew Shinosuke's true identity as the third prince of the Land of Fire and was thus trying to avoid being involved in the competition for the throne, unlikely but possible, it was probable that he indeed possessed remarkable self-control. Or it could be that the boy saw past his friendly, neighborhood older brother act, resulting in an unwarranted caution. "Setsuna, do you think he figured out who I really am?" Shinosuke asked his attendant. She immediately replied without hesitation, "Not likely, Your Highness. The face-changing technique applied to Your Highness does not use chakra, so not even the Sharingan could see through your disguise." "That's what I thought too." The current face he had on was the result of Setsuna's acupuncture techniques that temporarily shifted and morphed the bone structure of an individual. Even Setsuna's current face had been changed via the same method to allow for the pair to walk through the capital's streets unrecognized. Otherwise, both of their eye-catching appearance would be too conspicuous for them to travel incognito. Not to brag, but his original appearance was way better looking than his current visage. And Setsuna similarly had a cool beauty type of image that was bound to draw unnecessary attention. Not to mention such disguises were necessary to avoid the eyes dispatched to watch them. His second brother thought he was being slick by working with that crafty rat in charge of the nation's intelligence and covert operations and sending his lapdogs to watch Shinosuke and the Crown Prince. How foolish. He was just an idiot blessed with low cunning and the powerful Duke as a grandfather. That rat holding the position of Minister of Intelligence would sooner swallow him up than subserviently obey like a lapdog. He was a man that their father, the daimyo, exerted much effort to subdue. He would likely start rebelling the moment the throne changed hands, and yet his second brother conceitedly thought he could control that rat. Shinosuke shook his head, disappointed in his brothers. One was an ill-tempered buffoon cursed with mediocre talents and the other a morally bankrupt and crafty scoundrel who thinks of himself cleverer than he actually is. It was like they were begging for him to snatch the throne out from under them. But he was careful not to overplay his hand. Though personally incompetent, they had powerful backers and broad influence over the Kizaku. For now, he was more than willing to play the part of the pitiful half-commoner prince with nary a supporter. His plan was one that was 8 years in the making, and for the eventual successful completion of it, Shinosuke would throw away his pride to avoid being seen as a threat. At least not before the last domino had fallen and it was too late for any of them to prevent his inevitable rise to the throne. Then, and only then, would he finally be able to confront the man he called his father and pay him back for his mother's death. And once that was done, he would set out on the task of purging this nation's corrupt Kizaku before tearing down the entire warped system of nobility. Shinosuke cleared his head of the thoughts which an outsider would undoubtedly deem as treasonous. His eyes that were previously holding on to a cold rage and murderous intent faded away into the usual expression of brightness and warmth. If nothing else, the prince was a patient man. He would wait for the perfect opportunity to begin his campaign. He would allow his brothers to continue on their delusional path, for Shinosuke truly believed that there will be no obstacle on his ascent to the throne. He who believed without doubt at all that he will be the daimyo, that is what it means to be prince. For now, however, he had plenty of things to do to prepare for the day his ambitions would be realized. "Come," said Suna. "We have places to be and people to coerce." "At once, Your Highness." The next 2 days Team 10 spent in the capital passed slowly. What was meant to be a vacation quickly became dull, because really, what else was there to sightsee in a city? Given that chakra usage was restricted, the genin could not even train lest they were fined by the city guard. Asuma spent day 2 away from the team visiting and catching up with his old colleagues, leaving us to our own devices. Though the man had claimed this to be a vacation, I figured he thought of it more as a chance to catch up with his old friends. I spent the day with my teammates, exploring the city, looking to find some way to stave off my boredom with limited success. Hinata had bashfully called it a date, which I thought was a weird way to label an outing with all 3 members of our genin team. I had heard whispers of an underground coliseum, sponsored by the Kizaku, where warriors fought for the entertainment of the audience who were mainly nobility. Or of a black market auction operated by the Yakuza that occurred once a year which received the patronage of the Kizaku. However, these were only rumors and hearsay, which even if they were true, I was not qualified to be invited to them. It struck me as odd that the supposedly all-knowing and omniscient Godzai Kurano failed to prevent these illicit activities, but thinking about it more, it was probably because the nobility willed it to be so that the city guard left them alone. Our stay in Yoshio's residence also went by smoothly and without any unexpected incidences. The subsequent assassination attempts the merchant had been so worried about failed to come to pass, so our protective services were not needed. After my last encounter with Shin, or rather, Shinosuke, the 3rd prince of the Land of Fire, I never saw him again. I had assumed that the prince might have had an unhealthy amount of interest in me, which on hindsight could have been a mistaken presumption I supposed, but seeing that the man did not come looking for me, I was proven wrong. I couldn't tell if I was disappointed or not. On one hand, being friendly with someone as influential and as distinguished as a prince was a tempting proposition. But on the other hand, it was far too early for me to be rubbing shoulders with such people of such powerful personage. If it were the me back in my previous life, I would have dived right in without a concern for being involved in something I couldn't handle. Plots and traps were rebuffed with ease with the power of the almighty dollar. 1 billion of them to be precise. Now, however, caution dictated my every move. The gamer system I received from the random omnipotent being was, to say the least, overpowered, yes. But I was still far too lacking to be risking premature discovery of this gift. Until I was able to hold my own against the myriad of life-threatening villains, I was not willing to endanger myself by put myself in the crosshairs of the dangerous characters in this world. Characters like Shinosuke, for instance, who could presumably wield the power and authority of an entire nation. It was now our last day in the capital and we exited the city gates without any fanfare, making our back to Konoha. Though unlike our slow, civilian pace we moved at previously, we would be progressing at the speed of how shinobi usually traveled, i.e. running through treetops. Sasuke leaned back, avoiding a chop from Kakashi that was seen through with his Sharingan, and swung his fist back as a counter. The copy Jounin parried the blow half-heartedly before his leg flew to the side, landing swiftly onto a Naruto clone, dispersing it. However, the blonde truly embodied the saying, cut off one head and 2 grows back, as a couple more clones took the place of the one that was destroyed, continuing their assault on the man. The Uchiha hung back, content to catch his breath while watching his teammates' clones bombard their sensei with sheer numbers. As difficult as it was for Sasuke to admit it, but ever since Shinji had taught Naruto about the Kichibunshin training method, the blonde had grown leaps and bounds in terms of fighting ability. His greatest weakness, which had been a lacking foundation of the basics in all forms of the shinobi arts, was shored up within a month of training. Sasuke could hardly believe his eyes watching what amounted to years of training condensed into a single month, the result of Naruto's generous exploitation of the Kichibunshin's memory transference feature. Sasuke could oftentimes see the improvement happening in front of his very own eyes. Chakra control, taijutsu forms, shuriken jutsu and more. All of them were drastically improving day after day. Naruto might have been a mess of a shinobi when he graduated, but just a month later, he was quickly resembling what someone that could be comfortably recognized as an average genin capabilities-wise. A far cry from Sasuke's previous assessment of him a month ago. The Uchiha similarly trained with a Kichibunshin to maximize his training speed as well. However, unlike the monstrous blonde who could easily summon 100 clones with chakra to spare, Sasuke could barely function after just forming 3 clones. Which was why he was limited to just creating 1 or at most 2 for training purposes. It was abnormal, Sasuke concluded. The difference between Naruto's chakra reserve and his own was massive to say the least. He knew that some people were naturally gifted when it came to chakra capacity, like Shinji for example. But even his prodigious cousin could not compare to the dead last when it came to just how much chakra Naruto had in him. Definitely abnormal. That was not the only abnormality Sasuke had observed. It wasn't obvious when they were in the Shinobi Academy, but after spending some time training together as a team, Sasuke quickly realized that Naruto recovered extremely quickly. Abnormally quickly. Small cuts and bruises would disappear by themselves after just a few minutes of rest, and the dead last didn't even seem surprised by such a phenomena. A vast chakra capacity, fast regeneration rate and seemingly endless stamina. These were the peculiarities Sasuke had observed after a month of training with the blonde. And he wasn't the only one. His other teammate, the Nara, was the first to have remarked upon the strangeness of Naruto's physique, secretly and between themselves. He had commented that it was something he had noticed before in the academy, but only after training together with the blonde for a prolonged period of time did he likewise realize it was abnormal to such a large extent. Shikamaru had enigmatically mentioned that he might have a theory to the reasons behind the Naruto's weird constitution but refused to explain himself even upon Sasuke pressing for answers. Useless. At least his Sharingan training was going well. Sure, at first when he found out Kakashi had a surgically implanted Sharingan eye under his forehead protector, his first reaction was one of shock, disgust, anger and sadness. But, after the initial disturbance, Sasuke calmed down when Kakashi explained parts of how he got the eye in the first place. After reluctantly and unwillingly accepting the explanation, Sasuke received training on how to use his Sharingan eye on a deeper level than he had once achieved. Although Shinji was a good teacher, the Rookie of the Year never went through proper Uchiha training himself, so there was no way he could grasp all the nuances and subtleties of pushing their bloodline ability to the maximum. Kakashi on the other hand had a decade to figure it out. Sasuke might not be willing to accept Kakashi as a legitimate user of the Sharingan eye, but he wasn't foolish enough to deny an opportunity when he saw one. He accepted the offer, an order really, to be taught by Kakashi, and transferred that knowledge to Shinji whenever they were alone together. Speaking of whom, while Team 10 was out on their very first C-ranked mission, Sasuke could only look towards the horizon in the direction of the capital in envy. Yet at the same time he understood that of all the newly graduated genin, Shinji was definitely the one most deserving of such prestige. Furthermore, when they compared teams, the Hyuga and Aburam was relatively competent in their own rights, whereas his own teammates were a dead last who was improving but still lacking, and a lazy idler who would rather sleep than train. The inter-team training sessions Shinji had organized revealed to Sasuke that his team could at times shine brighter than what their usually dull glow would expose, but the problem was that those moments were few and far between. What held them back was, as Kakashi had put it, a lack of teamwork and cohesion which would only come with practice. Or at least that was what the Jounin claimed it to be. Which was why their regular team trainings would involve teamwork exercises that was essentially a 1v3 battle mixed in with individual one-on-one tutoring. Sasuke had burned Shinji's words spoken that day into his mind. Step 1. Prepare, which he interpreted as developing personal strength. That was a mission in progress and would likely be a while before he would achieve a satisfactory level of strength. Step 2. Gather comrades. His first choice was of course, Shinji, perhaps the only other person in the world who could relate to Sasuke's circumstances. Now, he was looking at Naruto and Shikamaru as possible allies in his hunt for Itachi. Naruto growing stronger was good news in Sasuke's eyes. The Uchiha wasn't insecure enough to admit that he would need help to kill his brother, and at the rate Naruto was improving, he would very likely be of assistance when it came down to it. Shikamaru had been showing a real flair for strategy, undoubtedly useful for Step 3 and 4, conduct reconnaissance and prepare an ambush respectively. Most of their team's tactics was decided by Shikamaru, who Sasuke had to admit was simply better at such matters. Once again, he was reminded that it was unlikely he would be able to do everything himself, as much as he wanted to. Specializations existed for a reason. He was big enough to admit that he wasn't perfect at everything, precisely the reason why Step 2 was so crucial in his plans. "You're distracted." A voice broke him out of his thoughts, and he paid for his negligence as a foot slammed into the side of his face and launched him a distance away. Kakashi withdrew his leg and turned to fend off the rest of the Naruto clones he had left behind to strike at the unfocused Uchiha. "TSK, seriously, just follow the plan," Shikamaru muttered to himself, berating the inattentive Uchiha who was supposed to jump in after Naruto had distracted Kakashi for a while to land a solid hit on the Jounin, which was their assigned goal for today's training. Their Jounin squad leader had set a rule when they first started training as a team. So long as the team could achieve the goal Kakashi had set for them that day, they would be dismissed early to do whatever they wanted. It was a clever way to motivate the lazy Nara, and it worked. Shikamaru just needed to make sure the goal was achieved as quickly as possible so that he could skive the rest of the day. And he succeeded, sometimes. Said goal usually changed every few days, from having to land a solid blow on Kakashi like today, or even something as weird as being sent to take pictures within the women's side of the hot springs from 10 different angles. Stealth training, Kakashi had called it. There were many things Shikamaru would do for the chance to shirk tedious things like training or missions, but he was not willing to be sent to the hospital by irate Kunoichi just to be lazy. "Oi, what are you guys doing?" Naruto yelled out, watching his clones get decimated by Kakashi before forming his trademark hand seal and creating more to replace the fallen Kichibunshin. The newly created clones rushed forward in a coordinated manner, each one throwing out punches or kicks targeting different weak spots. Someone who had seen the way Naruto used his clones previously would be surprised at how organized they were now as compared to a month ago. With better chakra control as a result of multiplying the efficiency of the leaf concentration exercise by 100 times using clones, Naruto was able to create 1.5 times the number of clones as before using the same amount of chakra. going through proper taijutsu katas and searing them into his memories using, once again, 100 clones, allowed Naruto to use his clones more efficiently, allowing each blow to land with more accuracy and greater impact than before. Increasing his proficiency with the regular illusionary bunshin technique subsequently added greater unpredictability to his fighting style when fighting en masse. Turns out, the secret to fixing his problem with the regular bunshin technique was to not limit himself with creating just one clone like he was always trying to do. Instead, he used the same amount of chakra to create as many as he could. And when his shadow clones themselves performed the bunshin technique to create illusionary clones, it created a battlefield where a sea of orange and yellow would swarm an enemy, who would find it extremely difficult to distinguish between what was real and what wasn't. It was a strategy Shikamaru had crafted for him. Though he didn't really understand what he meant until Naruto saw how effective it was with his own eyes. Imagine 1,000 Naruto clones barraging an enemy, but only 100 of which were solid shadow clones while the rest of were illusionary intangible clone. Send a few regular bunshin to attack an enemy first, and when they let their guard down thinking they were all normal, intangible clones, attack with a solid Kage bunshin. They would then be tricked into thinking that shadow clone was the original, only to be ambushed by more solid shadow clones who they had mistakenly assumed to be incorporeal clones. It was an attack on both the body and the mind, Shikamaru had claimed. It had proven to be ineffective against Kakashi, but only because the man was an elite jounin and ex-Sunbu captain who could see through such a cheap trick at a glance. Against others less experienced, however, it had the potential to frustrate them to death trying to see through the authenticity of 1,000 clones at once. And upon successful completion of the mission, in my capacity as Jounin squad leader, I granted a 2-day vacation for my team to be spent in the capital. I judged that after their tense, first mission outside the village where they encountered an unexpected complication in the mission, they needed a break for rest and recuperation. Following which, we promptly returned to Konoha, awaiting further missions. End report. Asuma finished recounting the mission with a slightly proud smile to his father, who sat at his desk reading through the mission report the Jounin had submitted to the Konoha branch office in the capital, eager to see the reaction of the man who had doubted his team. However, the praise or even begrudging acknowledgement he had been expecting did not come. The Sundame put down the scroll and gazed at his son dismissively. After so many years, he could already see through his son's pretense of indifference. He could tell what Asuma was thinking, what he wanted to hear from him. Commendation, concession, and maybe even an apology. Hiruzen held no qualms satisfying his son's desire to be acknowledged. But that was only if he earned it. The mission as a whole was successful, but there were still many points he could criticize. For instance, leaving his team of freshly graduated genin alone with the client to go off pursuing assassins was so thoughtless he could hardly believe it to be a decision made by a jounin. In a situation of imperfect information, his sole priority should have been staying by the side of the client and his team to protect them. The only reason he could think of for such negligence was an unfounded confidence in his team. Was such confidence justified with a team that was only formed a month and a half prior? Hiruzen didn't think so. But at the same time he held back his words of criticism. The Sundame understood that there was nothing he could have said that would change Asuma's mind. The mission was successfully completed, while he and his team made it back safely unharmed. There wasn't much else he could ask for without seeming unreasonable. Furthermore, Hiruzen also knew that the only reason why he was so hard on Asuma was because he was his son, and as such the Sundame held what others might perceive as unreasonably high expectations for Asuma. There was no point in souring their relationship further by needlessly pointing out the mistakes Asuma made when he would have heavily praised any other team leader who had done the same. After the brief moment of silence where his father was silently appraising him, Asuma realized that the validation he was seeking would not be coming his way. The Jounin found himself frowning, and as he turned to leave with a bitter expression on his face, his father called out after him. "Good job, Asuma. You proved me wrong after all." Asuma paused, unsure of how to process his feelings and uncertain of what his father was really thinking. "Yeah, I got it." With that, he dismissed himself and left the Hokage's office, a shadow of a smile gracing his face. Watching his son leave his office, Hiruzen nodded, satisfied with how he prevented another altercation from breaking out. Standing up and pacing to the window, he looked in the direction of the capital, stroking his beard. "How long has it been? 15, no, 20 years. Yeah, it was about 20 years since he helped that man take the throne." Hiruzen could still remember the day Ishikawa Matsuhiro, now commonly known as the daimyo of the Land of Fire, asked for his help to assassinate his siblings and political enemies. Also that Matsuhiro could become the next daimyo. Such ruthlessness was rare even in the world of shinobi. It seemed to the Sun Dame that after 20 years, the next generation of princes are now starting to move to consolidate their influence and secure their seat on the throne. He was glad that Asuma had returned to Konoha before the true conflict in the capital began, before he was dragged into that ruthless competition. Seems like the capital is going to get messy, best to stay out of that turmoil until Matsuhiro sorts things out. He muttered to himself as he recalled the man he respectfully addressed as Daimyo-sama in public. Shinji POV. After we returned from the capital, things calmed down and we settled back into our usual pattern of D-rank missions and team trainings, a schedule that I more than welcomed. Being stuck on the road and in the capital where we couldn't use chakra made me feel stifled since I did not have the time to train. The moment I had the time and privacy, I had activated my Sharingan in my own home. For no reason other than missing the feeling of absolute clarity and awareness it gave me. Sasuke welcomed me back in his usual tsund manner, though I would have much preferred it coming from a girl, preferably a busty one. That brat had looked unimpressed after I recounted what had happened on the mission, like fighting off assassins and even killing one of them with my own hands seemed lackluster in comparison to what he had expected of me. Did he think I was going off to rescue a princess from the clutches of an evil demon lord? I also visited Hannah after I returned, who in her usual habit of showing excessive skinship, had dragged me into her bosom when I showed up at her veterinary clinic. That was what I'd call a warm welcome. I dived right back into training, rigorously pushing the limits of my body to raise my physical stats while my created shadow clones continue to grind levels in my skills. Priority was placed on my wind and fire nature chakra transformation. Since I first acquired the skills, my wind nature transformation, and fire nature transformation, they only increased the damage dealt by wind and fire related skills by 15% each as well as reducing CP cost by 3%. Now, however, it looked something like this. Wind nature transformation, passive, LVL, 4. Increased efficiency in handling wind nature chakra. Plus 60% damage dealt with all wind-related skills. Minus 12% CP cost to all wind-related skills. Fire nature transformation, passive, LVL, 3. Increased efficiency in handling fire nature chakra. Plus 45% damage dealt with all fire-related skills. Minus 9% CP cost to all fire-related skills. Under Asuma's tutelage, who focused more on wind-natured chakra, it leveled up at a faster pace than its fire counterpart. To supplement this skill, I also acquired more futon ninjutsu from the Uchiha clan's jutsu repository. After my graduation as a genin, Sajuk had also allowed me entry into the genin section of the Uchiha clan library, greatly increasing my access to higher-level ninjutsu, genjutsu and taijutsu scrolls. However, futon ninjutsu scrolls were rare even in the jutsu library of the famed Uchiha clan. Likely because shinobi with wind affinities were much rarer compared to, say, the Land of Wind. On the other hand, Kaiten ninjutsu scrolls were abundant, greatly increasing my repertoire of destructive fire techniques. Genjutsu was another branch of the shinobi arts I was dipping my toes into, to round out my skills as a jack of all trades. Back when I was still an academy student and could thus only access the academy section, genjutsu scrolls found there only covered the basics. Many of them theory textbooks and only a few containing proper genjutsu techniques. The genin section posed no such limitations. As for taijutsu, although there were more advanced forms of martial arts available, I decided not to learn them. I thought it prudent to focus on the ones I had yet to master instead of cluttering up my skill list with a bunch of martial arts techniques I only had a shallow understanding of. I also continued my experiments to create new skills. From what I could tell, the efficacy of self-created skills like Flash Step and Shinkyoken surpassed techniques learned from scrolls. I figured that continued trial and error could produce another of such skills. What I focused on primarily was the infusion of wind or fire nature chakra into skills like Power Strike and Chakra Enhancement. The results, well, I achieved moderate success. It wasn't long before we were assigned another C-ranked mission. This one, however, was completely different from what I had been expecting. Unlike our previous mission, this time we were handed the mission scroll at the mission assignment office proper. Your mission, should you choose to accept, is simple. You are to travel to the land of rivers and set fire to the crops of a certain farm. The mission assignment staff member, an administrative Chuanin, explained as he picked up a mission scroll from the pile on the desk and offered it to us. Details are in the mission brief. Hinata gasped, set fire to a farm. But why? The Chuanin narrowed his eyes before glancing at Asuma. The Jounin nodded and put a hand on Hinata's shoulder. You should know by now our job isn't to ask questions. Besides, we haven't even chosen to accept the mission, how can we ask for information about it? The Hyuuga nodded in understanding before silencing herself. Why? I mused in my head. There could be a dozen different reasons. Another farmer wants to get rid of the competition, a merchant wants to buy the land of the farmer, or the farmer might just have offended a petty, wealthy person. Truth is, it didn't matter what the reasons were. As long as someone was willing to pay the right amount, they could hire our services. I would admit that the prospect of doing something that would lean so heavily against the doctrine of altruism the system implicatively preached was slightly disconcerting. It served as a sufficient wake-up call, reminding me that not all of our missions involved performing universally good acts. At times, we might be called to assassinate a monk, spy on a saint, or commit arson on an innocent farmer like now. Asuma stepped forward. Land of Rivers home, wasn't there a hidden village set up there? Tanigakyo, Hidden Valley Village, I think it was called. Any possible conflict of interest? Irrelevant. Research suggests the farmer shouldn't be wealthy enough to hire shinobi guards, nor does he have any family members who might have ties there. Otherwise, this wouldn't be a C-rank mission. The mission desk Chuanin answered. Are we entering the land of rivers officially? I asked, slightly taken aback when every pair of eyes in the room shifted towards me. Did I speak out of turn? Infiltration into another nation, even if they were allied or under some treaty, was problematic, especially given our identities as shinobi. Having to sneak in under guise would bump up the difficulty of the mission up to B rank, or at least clearly not suitable for fresh genin. The Chuanin sized me up for a moment before cracking a slight smile. You got a smart cookie with you there, Asuma-san. Yes, your team will be entering officially, not that it would be a concern in the first place. The border between the land of fire and land of rivers is pretty porous, so there shouldn't be guard patrols or anything unless you get too close to Tanigakure or the land of rivers capital city. I appeared frazzled by the compliment as I realized what I had mistaken as offense was actually a glint of recognition in the other shinobi's eyes. Ah, I see. Thank you. Asuma took the offered scroll. Team 10 accepts the mission. The moment my Jounin squad leader spoke those words, a system notification called for my attention. Quest alert. Slash and burn. Successfully complete the mission. Set Hatanekar Farms crops on fire. Bonus, burn the crops yourself. Rewards. Plus 5000 EXP. Bonus, new title. Accept. Y/N. Quest alert. Don't burn that farm. Prevent your team from successfully completing the mission. Hatanekar farm crops are not set on fire. Failure. New title. Accept. Y/N. Note, accepting, slash and burn, will automatically lock off, don't burn that farm, and vice versa. Ha. The system actually generated two different quests with contrasting objectives. This had never happened before. Looks I can only choose one. Note, accepting, slash and burn, will automatically lock off, don't burn that farm, and vice versa. Ha. The system actually generated two different quests with contrasting objectives. This had never happened before. Looks I can only choose one. Once again, it is rather obvious which direction the system is pushing me towards. Not burning the crops granted more EXP as well as more hidden objectives and presumably more hidden rewards. However, it also had failure consequences which the other quest did not have. At first glance, the second quest obviously offered better rewards, and thus would be the obvious choice. However, if I considered the indirect consequences of failing the mission, it wouldn't even be worth the time to consider. Failing our team's second C-rank mission would tarnish our reputation, which would possibly affect the opportunities our team will receive in the future. It might even muddy our chances of being entered into the next Chuanin exam which I needed to participate in. It was not a difficult mission, the only hard part being having to suppress our conscience and do what the uninitiated might consider inhumane. However, such acts were not exactly new to me. Back in my previous life, I was pretty sure my family did some shady shit as well. Be it blackmailing competitors or orchestrating civil wars in foreign countries, I was certain my family had a hand in some of these dark deeds when obstacles in our way magically resolved themselves. As a result, I did not protest the morality of the mission. It would be hypocritical of me, who enjoyed the fruits of my family's dubious enterprises, to judge how another went about doing the same thing. In other words, I accepted the slash and burn quest, which automatically locked out, don't burn that farm. Traveling to the land of rivers didn't take long. Just like the time we returned from the capital, without a civilian slowing us down, we could run across treetops at a fast pace. Asuma pushed us to go faster than we had to, even though there was plenty of time until the deadline for the mission completion. It was because he wanted us to train our bodies while traveling, maximizing efficiency. It wasn't a very effective training for me, however. My stamina was directly linked to my VIT, which wouldn't increase unless I was really pushing myself. Since we were running at the pace of the slowest member of our team, Shino, I didn't get the opportunity to really work up a sweat. While on the way, I struck up a conversation with Asuma, wanting to know more about the specifics of the mission brief, which is typically only issued to the squad leader. Asuma-sensei, who is our employer? I asked, trying to make conversation while leaping off a tree branch. Although forests covered a large proportion of the land of fire, now that we were crossing the border to the land of rivers, the geography and biome started changing as well. There were more plains and flat land in the land of rivers as compared to the lush forests and undergrowth of the land of fire. And of course, we started seeing more streams and rivers, the namesake of the country. Our employer has requested to keep his identity hidden, so even I have no idea of their identity. He answered absent-mindedly, clearly paying more attention to our surroundings than to the question. Oh. I didn't know people could make mission requests anonymously. Shino remarked. Though Shino was the taciturn type, he was slowly opening up to us as the days went by. He was speaking his mind more often nowadays, and with longer sentences as well. Well, the mission assignment office probably knows who he is, since they are required to dispatch people to do background research on the client. But clients can also request to stay anonymous, so his identity is on a need-to-know basis only. Asuma responded before continuing. Conditions like that are actually pretty common for high-ranked missions, since there is a possibility the shinobi assigned the mission can get captured and interrogated. The client wouldn't want their name to spill out of loose lips in those situations. Scary. Hinata muttered under her breath. Thinking that she was starting to get nervous over the possibility of getting captured and interrogated, I changed the subject. Doesn't the land of rivers have their own shinobi village? Why did the client hire us instead? And would the burning of crops really warrant the employment of shinobi? Some local thugs would be sufficient, no. Plenty of reasons why. Asuma began before his lips curled up wryly. What do you guys think? Why would the client hire us instead of Tanigakyo shinobi or even some local thugs, as Shinji suggested? Take it as a mental training exercise. He's testing us, I realized. The client might be from the land of fire. Maybe that's why he hired Konoha shinobi instead. Hinata offered hesitantly. Could be. But our rates are also more expensive than say Tanigakyo, so that might not be it. Asuma refuted. Discretion. It is likely Tanigakyo shinobi might divulge the employer's identity, so we are the obvious logical alternative. Shino assessed. The Jounins nodded sagely. Good guess. Though initial reports might suggest that the farm owner has no relation to Tanigakyo members, it could still be a possibility down the line that the truth might be exposed one day. And Konoha certainly has a better reputation than Tani. What about you, Shinji? What do you think? What Hinata and Shino has said makes sense, but I think the answer is likely simpler than that. I suggested. Asuma looked intrigued. Go on, elaborate. Following his prompting, I clarified my earlier remark. The farm we are going to is in the land of rivers, and so is Tanigakyo. For Konoha, we don't usually do missions that can potentially harm the interests of the land of fire. This might simply hold true for Tani as well. The client might have contracted us knowing that Tani would not entertain his request, since what the mission entails could be considered as harming the interests of the land of rivers. He looked amused, so we were approached simply because the client didn't think Tani would have accepted his request. Interesting theory. Right, and for all we know, we might have been approached second after the client was rejected by Tani. Oh. If what you have said is true, wouldn't that suggest that it might be dangerous if Tani took that information and went to the farm owner and cajoled him into hiring Tani Shinobi for protection? Asuma continued his probing. I titled my head, only now considering that possibility. Maybe. I never considered that. Asuma looked satisfied at my concession. That is why it is good to always examine a situation at many different angles. Look underneath and consider how not just your enemy but even third parties might act and react to your own actions. We understand, Asuma-sensei. I answered for the rest. Good. Never be careless, and never take what you have been told and what you can see at face value. There is no need to be paranoid, but vigilance can keep you out of unnecessary trouble or even save your life one day. He lectured, though I figured he wasn't chiding us. Rather, it was a teachable moment for us genin. And about possible enemy Shinobi who might be guarding the farm, we just have to be extra cautious when we approach, as we always should be. Take some time to scout out the area. Observe our target from afar and determine if there are any hidden dangers lurking ahead. Luckily for our team, we have not one but two great trackers and scouts that can sieve out potential enemies. He finished while looking towards Hinata and Shino in acknowledgement. Hinata in response blushed at the sudden praise while the Aburam showed no particular reaction. Then what about the farm we are going to? Any info on that? I asked Asuma. Hatanaka Farms. They mainly produce corn, but they also ranch some livestock like sheep and cattle. I turned to him in surprise. We're going to burn those animals too. At my question, Hinata and even Shino felt upset. Fighting against armed assassins looking to take the life of the client who employed us to protect him was one thing, torching innocent animals was another. They weren't cruel after all. Sensing their trepidation, Asuma waved our concerns off. Nah, the mission didn't specify killing any livestock. Just the crops. Thank God. I wouldn't want to be forced to burn cute, baby goats alive. I confessed. The Jounin nodded in satisfaction. There are times we have to suppress our conscience in order to complete the mission. That said, I am also glad this is not one of those times. It's good to know you three don't approve of wanton cruelty. Remember, we may be Shinobi but at the same time we are also humans. Make sure never to lose your humanity, otherwise we wouldn't be humans anymore. Just weapons, tools wielded by the rich to do their bidding. Shino and Hinata nodded with conviction, though I just mulled over the thought. Being used by the rich. Laughable. I used to be the one who did all the using. There is no way I would let myself be used. Let them try, and I will show them why the gamer cheat is considered by people to be overpowered. Thinking of tools, I wonder when Team 7 would go on their wave mission and encounter the iconic Zabuza and Haku. When we left Konoha, they were still doing D rank, but they were about to reach the 2-month mark before they could start doing C ranks. My team could be considered to be relatively precocious since we started C ranks early as a result of the smashing success that was our first escort mission. Who knows? Maybe when we get back to Konoha, Team 7 would have already left for the land of waves. A part of me wanted to be there with them, experiencing the legendary wave arc alongside the series' main characters. I wanted to test myself against Haku, who was portrayed as a genius whose strength was not far from Zabuza. Furthermore, though I wanted to minimize the butterfly effect my existence brought into the world, I was also curious if it was possible for the Hyoton user to be saved. But the rational side of me knew that it would be highly unlikely. They would have no reason to send out 2 genin teams on a single C-ranked mission, since the mission assignment office wouldn't have known about the missing Ninzab user being involved. Which actually had me wondering how they missed that in the first place, if, like Asuma had mentioned, they dispatched investigators to conduct background checks on mission requesters. Perhaps they only investigated the identity of the client, just to make sure they weren't a spy sent by another hidden village setting up an ambush. And after making sure that Tazuna wasn't some sort of undercover agent, it would be too much effort to scrutinize just a C-ranked mission even further. But perhaps my presence wouldn't be needed after all. Sasuke and Naruto were stronger as compared to their canon counterparts, and in place of the deadweight that was Sakura, Shikamaru was there instead. The outcome of their battle at the Great Naruto Bridge might be completely different to how it concluded in the series. In truth, even though I always reminded myself to keep butterfly effects and unintended changes to the future at a minimum, I was kind of looking forward to seeing how my intervention might have changed the outcome of the wave mission. As we neared our mission objective after crossing the border, as porous as we had been told, Asuma dispatched Hinata and Shino to conduct reconnaissance on the farm. We had waited till nightfall before doing so, since darkness would give us extra cover. Plus neither the Hyuuga's Byakugan nor the Aburam's Kikaichua needed sunlight to illuminate their search. Thankfully, our pessimistic prediction of possibly having to contend with Tanigaki or Shinobi were found to be proven false. Other than the farmer and his family members, 1 wife and 3 children, there were no one else in the immediate vicinity of the farm. Our strategy was straightforward given the newly acquired information: strike fast and withdraw to the perimeter, making sure the crops were truly destroyed before we left the area. I volunteered to be the one lighting the cornfield on fire given my proficiency with Kaiten ninjutsu. Asuma agreed. He had commented that in a different situation where heavier restrictions on chakra usage and discretion were imposed, the first choice would not have been to use Kaiten ninjutsu to accomplish the goal, since traces of chakra could be picked up by investigators searching for the culprits. Instead, gasoline and matches would have done the job just as well. There was no need to waste chakra if it wasn't necessary. This time, however, it wasn't that important to conserve chakra, and stealth wasn't a big deal neither. Asuma would rather we strike fast and hard before quickly leaving to minimize the chances of triggering Murphy's Law. Once I was given the go-ahead, I went in. The cornfields were vast and expansive. Even under the cover of night, a sea of green and gold looked almost boundless, as if stretching infinitely over the horizon. It was a sea of green and gold that would soon turn into a sea of flames. In order to cover such a large area, a single Kaiten ninjutsu would not be sufficient. So in order to get it over and done with as fast as I could, I created 2 shadow clones and we spread out evenly to maximize the cover area. My CP that had been divided by 3 immediately started recovering, but was still enough to throw out a couple high-rank, chakra-intensive fire ninjutsu. It wasn't necessary to completely torch every single inch of the cornfield. The destructive nature of fire is its ability to spread by itself, igniting anything it could get a hold on that was flammable. We decided that something like a cornfield only needed half of its acres ignited and it would slowly finish the rest of the job. When my clones and I got into place, as if connected by telepathy, we jumped and unleashed the same jutsu at the exact same time. Kaiten, Goryuken no Jutsu. a large amount of chakra gathered into our chests, and thanks to the effects of fire nature transformation, the ease at which the chakra was transformed into a fire attribute was much faster than before I acquired the skill. Additionally, I could also now tweak the effects of the jutsu to suit my needs rather than following the execution of the technique to the letter. For instance, the Goryuka technique, a B-rank Kaiten ninjutsu, originally shaped a dragon head fireball that was more of a single-target explosive attack. However, with my increased expertise in handling fire nature chakra, I altered its results by releasing the gathered fire as a stream instead. As a result, liquid fire erupted out of my mouth like a fire hydrant expelling flames instead of water. Furthermore, I was still able to slightly manipulate the fire that was released to spread out over a wider area than the initial trajectory of the fire jet would have suggested. Again, it was due to fire nature transformation, skill that granted enhanced control over the handling of fire nature chakra. Immediately, bright and scorching flames swept the cornfields, illuminating the night with a horrendous sea of fire. Months of hard work, planting, fertilizing, and caring for the crops was erased in a single instant. The fruits of the farmer's labor were turned to ashes by me, for no other purpose than the completion of a mission and quest. I turned around and unleashed another hellstorm of fire in another direction, lighting up even more crops in the cornfield. With 2 B-ranked fire jutsu, 6 in total counting the clones, I reduced just slightly more than half of the total acres of cornfields to ashes. Already, the fire was burning out of control, spreading faster than regular flames. Fire formed out of chakra burned hotter and spread faster than normal fire, and it would take a bigger effort to extinguish them as well. Like a dam broken, there was no taking back the hell that I had unleashed unless a strong Suiten ninjutsu user was around to counteract the effects. This farm was finished. I left as quickly as I had arrived, leaving behind me a torrential sea of fire that was quickly cascading to the previously robust harvest. From a distance, over the roaring of flames and hot wind, I could hear panicked cries of horror and alarm with my heightened senses. It seems the farmer and his family were now alerted. It didn't matter, for there was nothing they could do now. The fire was already spreading out of control, and it would likely take Herculean efforts just to contain the conflagration and prevent it from igniting areas outside the cornfields like their homestead. What was being incinerated were not just the cornfields, but also the hopes, dreams, and livelihood of their entire family. Reduced to ashes in the span of a single night. If one did not stop to think about the inevitable despair and anguish of the farmer's family once what was assured to be the worst night of their lives was over, the contrast of the intense incandescent blaze against the darkness of the night sky could almost be considered beautiful. When I returned to my team, the sight of their grim faces marred by lightly wavering resolve and conviction greeted me. I wasn't sure what my face looked like right now, but if the hollow and weary feelings inside me was any indication, I probably didn't look much different from them. It was not the fatigue of unleashing 2 B-ranked ninjutsu one after another while having my CP divided by 3 that wore me out. Rather, it was the notion that I had just erased the hopes and dreams of innocent civilians that drained me. Inexplicably, traces of guilt and remorse found their way into my heart. The gamer's mind that usually stepped in to intercept such emotions was nowhere to be found. Perhaps such feelings were not debilitating enough for it to intervene, or maybe the system found it an appropriate punishment for my deeds. I couldn't tell, nor did I care. Perhaps I did deserve it. It would be too easy, too convenient for me to be spared the confrontation by my conscience just because a skill prevented it. Knowing that my family in my previous life probably did something similar but on an even larger scale was one thing, doing it myself was an entirely different matter. Asuma's concerned gaze met my eyes, the question in his head going unasked. I nodded back with a grim resolve. This was the life of a shinobi. Distasteful acts, unspeakable deeds and atrocious measures was our lived reality. The rose-tinted glasses I had been viewing my new life with had shattered, and what replaced it was a jaded realization of what it truly was that I asked for when I reincarnated here. Quest, slash and burn, completed. Successfully complete the mission. Set Hatanekar Farms crops on fire, square root. Bonus, burn the crops yourself, square root. Rewards. Plus 5000 EXP. Bonus, new title, Arsonist. Arsonist, plus 20% damage dealt when using fire-related skills. I dismissed the notifications without paying much mind to the alert contents. I wasn't in the mood for that right now. The fire in the cornfield was still flaring wildly when we left the farm, the radiant glow of the flames illuminating the night and casting light on our backs and our shadows on the ground now seeming more nightmarish than beautiful. Fuck, that caravan had nothing valuable on them. Kenta cursed as he counted the spoils of their raid. His partner, Mickey, collected the kunai and shuriken they had used on their attack, pulling the embedded weapons out from the corpses they had struck. Around them was an overturned carriage as well as several dead bodies on the ground. I told you there was not going to be anything worth taking. Merchants who can't even afford hiring shinobi guards are poorer than us. She replied while cleaning off the blood from a kunai on the clothes of a dead carriage driver. And I told you, dummy, that hitting a caravan with shinobi guards would just be suicide. Even if we do win, one of them might escape and our bounties will get increased. He shot back. Mickey glared at him, hey screw you. Kenta continued, right now, where we are, is the perfect sweet spot. Our bounty is high enough to deter weaker bounty hunters, but too low for the really strong ones to even bother. Robbing merchants who can only afford mercenaries lets us eliminate all witnesses. No one will find out it was us, missing Nin from Tani, that did it. She stalked forward annoyed, I know. You've said that how many times already? You think I'm dumb? He smirked, yeah you are so fucking stupid, it's tiring to even talk to you. Mickey narrowed her eyes and growled, getting up in his face. The fuck did you just say to me? You heard me. What are you gonna do about it, bitch? She snarled before lunging forward and capturing Kenta's lips, furiously assaulting him with her tongue. After some moments of heated passion, she broke away from the make-out session and leered sensually, I love it when you talk dirty to me. Her hands snaked underneath his shirt and up torso, while his gripped tightly on her bottom. Ooh, looks like someone is in the mood. Seriously, you always get horny after killing people. It's becoming a problem. Kenta whispered, breathing out on her neck that sent a pleasurable tingle down her spine. Mickey sultrily smiled before reaching down and groping his noticeably growing bulge, yeah. You love it too though. He chuckled, leaving Tani was the best decision we've made. That place was a dead end, sad, useless dump of a hidden village. There wouldn't have been a future there for us. That fucking geezer had the audacity to demote me, an elite Chuunin. How many Chuunin do they think they have? Fuck that place. Out here we can do whatever we want. And fuck wherever we want. Mickey licked her lips and made to unbutton his pants. Damn, calm down Mickey. Let's get out of here first before we get nasty. He grunted, obviously trying very hard to get his carnal impulses back under control. She pouted, fine. Get the loot and let's go. Quickly. The urgency in her voice only served to arouse Kenta even further, but rationality took over as he gathered the Rio notes and what few valuables he could find. Just as he was about to leave, however, the years of instincts built up over his career as a shinobi and more recently as a missing nin kicked in. An alarming sense of self-preservation, almost like a sixth sense, arose as Kenta injected a burst of chakra into his legs and used body flicker to move away. Luckily for the missing nin, he did as the next thing he knew, a blade comprised solely of wind chakra carved into the dirt road he had been standing on. Mickey! Kenta yelled out in warning, drawing his primary weapons, a pair of short scimitars, one black and one white. A figure leaped out of the nearby shrubbery. Kenta's eyes widened as he took in their appearance. What caught his eye the most, however, was the forehead protector engraved with Konohigakyo's symbol and the dark green flak jacket signifying the rank of Chunin or higher. As Asuma leaped out from his hiding place, his hands were already in the midst of finishing his hand seals. Ending on a tiger seal, the Jounin yelled out, "Kaiten, ash pile burning." A cloud of chakra-infused gunpowder and ash spewed out of his mouth, surrounding Kenta before Asuma flicked his lit cigarette into the cloud and igniting the smoke screen. Boom! That's it, guys. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel, and also make sure you tell me your recommendation in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.